This man claims he went to hell for his racism. What he saw there and the shocking ending will leave you breathless. Now, I share this in his own words. I used to be a respected pastor in Memphis, preaching about God's love every Sunday while harboring a darkness in my heart that would eventually drag me to the gates of hell itself. What I witnessed there, the damned souls, the acid rivers, and most shockingly, the familiar faces, has forever changed me. But nothing prepared me for the moment I saw him there, my own father, the man who taught me to hate, chained and tormented for the same sins he passed down to me. I'm Nathaniel Johnson, and this is my testimony of how racism nearly condemned my soul, almost destroyed my family, and led to an encounter that would shake the very foundations of everything I believed. The truth I learned in those horrifying depths would save not only my soul, but also my daughter's life, though I wouldn't understand this until it was almost too late. What I'm about to share isn't just a story of death and damnation, it's a father's journey from hatred to love, from blindness to sight. And it begins with the day I died on that church pulpit. June 12, 2024. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting rainbow shadows across my congregation. I stood at the pulpit, my Bible open to Matthew 5:44, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. The irony of those words would soon become apparent. Brothers and sisters, I began, my voice carrying across the hushed pews. Today we speak of love. My words trailed off as I caught sight of something that made my heart stutter. My daughter Rachel slipping into the back row, hand in hand with a young white man. The same man I'd forbidden her to see. The room began to spin. The faces before me blurred into a sea of colors, black and white faces mixing together like oil and water in my deteriorating vision. The Bible slipped from my trembling hands, hitting the pulpit with a thunderous crack that echoed through the silent church. Love your enemies, I whispered, the words burning like poison on my tongue. Then my chest exploded in pain. I clutched the podium, knuckles white against the dark wood. Lord, forgive the words caught in my throat as I collapsed. The last things I remember were Rachel's scream, running footsteps, and a white man's hands on my chest, the same hands I'd rejected when they'd reached out in friendship. Clear, a voice shouted. The church ceiling flickered above me like a distant star. We're losing him, another voice, younger, familiar. Through the chaos, I caught a glimpse of the white man's face. Dr. James Anderson, Rachel's boyfriend. He was trying to save my life. Then everything went black. And in that darkness, I began my descent into a hell of my own making. If this opening story has touched your heart and awakened something deep within your soul, support our mission of sharing these life-changing moments by subscribing to our channel. Join us in spreading stories that can transform lives one heart at a time. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1947 when the wounds of segregation ran deep through our city's veins. My earliest memory wasn't of toys or birthday parties, but of my father's stern voice saying, "Remember, son, they'll never see you as equal." He was a proud man, William Johnson, who worked as a janitor in an all-white school, coming home each night with stories that fed my growing hatred. The incident that shaped my young soul happened when I was 14. I had walked into Mercer's corner store, quarters jingling in my pocket for a bottle of Coca-Cola. Mrs. Mercer, the white owner, watched me like a hawk, her eyes following my every move. Before I could even reach for my money, a police officer stormed in, twisting my arm behind my back, demanding to know what I'd stolen. I learned two lessons that day: the sting of false accusations and the bitter taste of powerlessness. But it was what happened after that truly set my path. When I told my father, instead of comfort, he gave me anger. This is why we can't trust them, Nathaniel. Ever. I threw myself into education, determined to prove everyone wrong. By day, I studied harder than anyone in my class. By night, I listened to my father's stories of injustice, each one adding another brick to the wall I was building between myself and white America. I graduated top of my class, went to college, and eventually became a pastor, all while carrying that 14-year-old boy's pain inside me. The irony wasn't lost on me even then. I stood at the pulpit every Sunday preaching about God's love while harboring a heart full of prejudice. I married Sarah, a beautiful soul who saw through my facade. "Nate," she'd say, "you can't preach love with a heart full of hate," but I didn't listen. I was too busy being right. I became known as a powerful preacher, my sermons drawing crowds from across Memphis. What they didn't know was that I carefully crafted my messages to avoid any mention of racial reconciliation. I spoke of love in abstract terms, never addressing the very real divisions in our community. When white families began joining our congregation, I kept them at arm's length, using Scripture as a shield against genuine connection. Sarah's death in 2010 should have been my wake-up call. On her deathbed, she made me promise to let go of my hatred. "Don't let Rachel inherit your pain," she whispered. But even as I nodded, I knew I was lying to my dying wife. Our daughter Rachel grew up watching me navigate two worlds: the public face of pastoral love and the private reality of deep-seated prejudice. I became what I despised most, a hypocrite wearing a collar. Every Sunday I preached about forgiveness while nursing decades-old grudges. I spoke of unity while maintaining invisible boundaries. I talked about God's love while secretly believing it was color-coded. What makes this confession even more painful is that I didn't just fail God, I failed my own daughter. I watched her grow into a compassionate nurse, caring for all people regardless of their race, and instead of pride, I felt concern. When she started working at St. Jude's Children's Hospital, I should have celebrated her calling. Instead, I worried about the company she kept. The truth is, before my journey to hell and back, I was already living in a prison of my own making. A prison built brick by brick with every hateful thought, every prejudiced assumption, every moment I chose fear over love. I was Memphis's respected Pastor Johnson, known for powerful sermons about divine love, all while being a living testament to human hatred. Little did I know that God was about to show me exactly where such hatred leads in the most terrifying way possible. My reputation in the church grew alongside my inner turmoil. Every Wednesday I led Bible study, carefully selecting passages that wouldn't challenge my prejudices. "Judge not, lest ye be judged," I would quote, while silently judging every white face in my congregation. My sermons became masterpieces of omission, speaking of universal love while avoiding the thorny issues of racial reconciliation. I remember the day I first met Dr. James Anderson. He came to our church with his mother, Elizabeth, a well-known civil rights activist. I later learned she had marched with Dr. King, but at the time I saw only their whiteness. Elizabeth approached me after service, her hand extended in friendship. "Pastor Johnson, your sermon on love was moving," she said. I shook her hand but kept my distance, not knowing her son would later become central to my journey. Sarah had always been my moral compass. Even after her death, her voice would echo in my mind during moments of particular prejudice. "Nate," she would say, "you're better than this." But I'd grown skilled at silencing her voice, just as I'd grown skilled at justifying my prejudices with cherry-picked scripture. My daughter Rachel grew into a remarkable young woman despite my influence. She inherited her mother's compassion and none of my bitterness. At St. Jude's, she worked tirelessly with children of all races, showing them the kind of unconditional love I only preached about. I should have been proud. Instead, I worried she was becoming too comfortable with white people. The church board praised my leadership as our congregation grew more diverse, not realizing that every integrated service was a private torment for me. I maintained strict unwritten rules: white families could attend but never lead, could participate but never influence. I masked this segregation with smooth words about preserving our cultural heritage. My fellow pastors in Memphis saw me as a bridge builder, ignorant of the walls I was actually constructing. I spoke at racial reconciliation conferences, my words hollow and hypocritical. "We must move forward together," I would declare, while personally remaining anchored to the past. Then came the Sunday that changed everything. Rachel was late for service, unusual for her. When she finally arrived, I saw her slip into the back pew with James Anderson. Their fingers were intertwined, and her face glowed with a happiness I hadn't seen since her mother was alive. In that moment, my carefully constructed world began to crumble. The signs had been there. Rachel's increasing absences from Sunday dinners, her vague answers about her work friends, the mysterious phone calls that made her smile. I had ignored them all, confident in my ability to control my daughter's life as efficiently as I controlled my congregation. But seeing them together, my black daughter and that white doctor, something inside me snapped. The very foundations of my faith and my prejudices collided with devastating force. It was this collision that would lead to my collapse at the pulpit, my journey through hell, and ultimately my redemption. Looking back now, I realize I had become what the Pharisees were in Jesus' time, so focused on rules and divisions that I'd forgotten the greatest commandment, love. I had built my ministry on quicksand, preaching a gospel of love while practicing a religion of hate. The truth I would soon learn in the depths of hell was already written in every page of my Bible, in every beat of my daughter's compassionate heart, and in every word my Sarah had spoken before she died. But sometimes God needs to take drastic measures to open our eyes. And in my case, those measures would include a journey through the very gates of hell itself. 2 weeks before my collapse at the pulpit, Rachel came to my house on a quiet Sunday evening. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, much like the evenings when her mother was alive and we'd sit on the porch together as a family. She arrived just as I was settling into my armchair with my Bible, a nightly ritual I'd maintained since Sarah's passing. "Daddy, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I looked up from my reading, noting the determination in her eyes, Sarah's eyes. She sat across from me, wringing her hands in a way that immediately transported me back to when she was a little girl, confessing to some minor mischief. "I've met someone," she began. "Someone special. We've been dating for over a year now." My heart skipped a beat. A year? How had I not known? His name is Dr. James Anderson. He's a pediatric surgeon at St. Jude's, and Daddy, I love him. The room seemed to grow smaller with each word. "Anderson," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "The white doctor," the words came out like poison. Rachel's face hardened slightly. "Yes, Daddy. The white doctor who saved Marcus Johnson's life last month, you remember, Deacon Johnson's grandson? The white doctor who works extra shifts in the poorest neighborhoods. The white doctor who volunteers at the free clinic every weekend." I stood up, my Bible falling to the floor with a thud. "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not. I forbid it." "Forbid it," Rachel's voice rose. "Daddy, I'm 32 years old. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you I'm going to marry him." The word marry hit me like a physical blow. "Have you lost your mind? What would your mother say?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Mom would be happy for me. She'd see what you refuse to see, that James is a good man who loves me. She'd remember her own words about love being colorblind." "Love being colorblind?" I scoffed. "That's naive talk, Rachel. You don't understand the world." "No, Daddy," she interrupted, standing to face me. "You don't understand. You stand at that pulpit every Sunday preaching about God's love, but you don't practice it. You quote scripture about not judging others, but you judge everyone who doesn't look like you." Her words stung because they carried the weight of truth. "I've lived longer than you, Rachel. I've seen things. Yes, you've seen hatred and experienced discrimination, but you've let it twist you, Daddy. You've let it make you into something Mom would be ashamed of." The mention of Sarah's potential shame silenced me for a moment. Rachel pressed on, pulling out her phone and showing me a photo. It was her and James surrounded by children of all races at St. Jude's. The love in their eyes was unmistakable. "Look at this, Daddy. Really look. These children don't see color. They see love. They see two people who care about them. Why can't you?" I turned away from the photo. "You're making a mistake, Rachel. These relationships never work. You'll face discrimination, hatred." "Like the discrimination and hatred you're showing right now," her voice cracked. "Daddy, James asked me to marry him last week. I said yes, we're getting married in 3 months. I want you to walk me down the aisle, but if you can't accept us, if you can't see past your prejudice." She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Then I'll walk alone." The ultimatum hung in the air between us like a physical barrier. I thought of Sarah, of what she would say at this moment. But instead of hearing her wisdom, I heard my father's voice, "They'll never see you as equal." "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "Get out of my house." Rachel stood there for a moment longer, her mother's eyes looking at me with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "Mom was right," she said quietly. "You preach love, but your heart is full of hate. I'll pray for you, Daddy." She left quietly, closing the door with a gentle click that seemed louder than any slam could have been. I stood in my living room, surrounded by family photos and Bible verses on the walls, feeling more lost than I ever had in my life. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a journey that would take me to the very depths of hell to learn the true meaning of love. The weeks following Rachel's announcement were a blur of sleepless nights and troubled prayers. I threw myself into my pastoral duties with renewed fervor, as if enough preaching about love could drown out the hatred in my heart. But every sermon felt hollow, every prayer tainted by my hypocrisy. One evening, while preparing Sunday's sermon, I received a visit from Elizabeth Anderson, James's mother. She arrived unannounced, her silver hair gleaming in the church office's fluorescent light. "Pastor Johnson," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "we need to talk about our children." I looked up from my Bible, noting how she stood tall despite her age. "There's nothing to discuss, Mrs. Anderson. Rachel is making a mistake." Elizabeth sat down uninvited, placing a worn photo album on my desk. In 1963, she began, "I was beaten and arrested for marching with Dr. King. The officer who arrested me, he later became one of my dearest friends, walked me down the aisle at my wedding after my father died. People can change, Pastor Johnson. Love can heal." She opened the album, showing me photos of protests, of violence, of reconciliation. "My late husband was black, Pastor Johnson. James is biracial. Did you know that?" "Of course not, because you never took the time to know him. You saw his light skin and made your judgment." The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. James Anderson, the man I'd condemned for his whiteness, was himself a product of an interracial marriage. The irony made me dizzy. "Your sermon last week," Elizabeth continued, "was about the Samaritan woman at the well. How Jesus crossed racial and social boundaries to show God's love. Yet here you are, building walls between your own daughter and happiness." "It's different," I protested weakly. "Rachel doesn't understand the challenges." "Like the challenges my husband and I faced? The death threats? The burning crosses? We endured because love is stronger than hate, Pastor Johnson. Something you preach but don't seem to believe." She pulled out one final photo of James as a child, standing between his parents, his smile bright and innocent. "This is who you're rejecting. Not just a white doctor, but a man who has spent his life trying to heal the very divisions you perpetuate." Rising to leave, Elizabeth placed a hand on my shoulder. "Rachel told me about Sarah, about her final words regarding love and forgiveness. Are you honoring her memory with your hatred, Pastor?" After she left, I sat in my office until midnight, the photo album open before me, Sarah's voice echoing in my memory. That Sunday, I saw Rachel and James slip into the back pew of my church. The sight of them together, her hand in his, sent a wave of anger through me that nearly choked my sermon. I spoke about love that day, as I always did, but my words rang false even to my own ears. In the middle of quoting "Love your enemies," I felt the first sharp pain in my chest. Looking out at my congregation, I saw faces blurred together, black and white, young and old, all staring at me with growing concern. The pain intensified, and as my vision began to dim, I caught one final glimpse of Rachel running forward, James right behind her. As I collapsed, it was his medical training that sprang into action, his hands that began chest compressions, his voice that called for help. The last thing I heard before darkness took me was Rachel's voice, thick with tears, saying, "Don't you dare leave me like this, Daddy. Not with hate in your heart." Then everything went black. But this wasn't the end, it was merely the beginning of my journey into the depths of hell, where I would learn the true cost of hatred and the redemptive power of love. What I didn't know then was that my collapse wasn't just a medical emergency, it was God's way of showing me the path my hatred had laid out for my soul. The lessons I would learn in the hours to come would change not just my life, but the lives of everyone I loved. And it would all begin with a darkness deeper than any I had ever known. The darkness that engulfed me wasn't like anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't the gentle darkness of sleep, or even the stark darkness of a moonless night. This was a living darkness, a breathing entity that seemed to press against my soul with physical weight. My first conscious thought was of the pain, not the chest pain that had dropped me at the pulpit, but a new kind of agony that seemed to emanate from my very essence. The air around me was thick and hot, carrying the metallic taste of blood and the acrid stench of burning flesh. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding strange and muffled in the dense atmosphere. No echo returned. The darkness swallowed my words whole, leaving only an oppressive silence in their wake. Then I heard a soft whimper somewhere in the darkness. It sounded familiar, hauntingly so. "Rachel," I called out, my heart racing. The whimper grew louder, transforming into a sob that I recognized immediately. It was my daughter's voice, but not as an adult. This was Rachel at age 7, the night she first experienced racism at school. "They said I can't play with them. Daddy," her young voice echoed through the darkness. "They said their parents don't want them playing with colored kids." I reached out blindly toward her voice, but my hands found only empty air. The memory shifted, and now I heard Rachel as a teenager. "Dad, why did you make Tommy's family leave the church?" "They were my friends." The voices surrounded me, a chorus of my daughter's pain that I had either ignored or, worse, caused directly. Each memory was a knife twisting in my gut, each sob a hammer blow to my conscience. Suddenly, a dim red light appeared in the distance. It pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing me toward it. As I walked, the ground beneath my feet changed from solid to uncertain. Each step brought new horror. Sometimes I felt like I was walking on broken glass, other times through what seemed like warm, sticky blood. The air grew hotter, and breathing became increasingly difficult. That's when I saw the first shadow, a dark figure darting just at the edge of my vision. When I turned to look directly at it, it vanished, leaving only the echo of mocking laughter. "Pastor Johnson," a voice called out, deep and resonant. "The man who preaches love but sows hatred, welcome to your reward." I spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The red light grew stronger, revealing glimpses of my surroundings. What I saw made me wish for the darkness again. Bodies writhed in the shadows, some partially submerged in what looked like boiling tar. Their screams formed a horrible symphony of suffering. I recognized faces, people I had known, people I had judged, people I had turned away from my church because of the color of their skin. "No," I whispered, backing away. "This isn't real. This can't be real." "Oh, but it is," the voice responded, closer now. "This is very real, Pastor. This is where hatred leads. This is where your soul belongs." A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, imposing, with wings that seemed to absorb what little light existed. Its face was both beautiful and terrible, like a statue carved from darkness itself. "You've spent your life building this place," it said, gesturing to the horror around us. "Every sermon preached in hypocrisy, every judgment passed in hatred, every moment you chose prejudice over love, they're all here, waiting for you." The demon, for what else could it be, reached out with a clawed hand and touched my forehead. In that instant, every hateful thought I'd ever had, every discriminatory action I'd ever taken, played before my eyes in vivid detail. I saw myself through God's eyes, and the sight brought me to my knees. "Please," I begged, though I wasn't sure who I was begging to. I didn't know. "Oh, but you did know," the demon replied. "Your wife told you, your daughter told you, your daughter told you, your own conscience told you, but you chose not to listen. Now let me show you where that choice leads." The red light suddenly flared brilliantly, revealing a vast landscape of torment that stretched as far as I could see. And in that moment I realized this wasn't just a nightmare, this was judgment. My journey through hell was about to begin. The demon led me through what seemed like an endless corridor of torment. The walls themselves appeared to be made of writhing bodies, their faces contorted in eternal agony. But what struck me most was that I recognized many of them, people I had known, judged, and condemned in my life. "Welcome to the Hall of Prejudice," my guide announced with a cruel smile. "Each soul here earned their place through hatred, just as you have. But first, let me show you something special." We stopped at what appeared to be a window, but instead of glass, it showed scenes from my life like a living movie. I saw myself as a young pastor, turning away a white family from my church with polite but firm words about cultural differences. The scene shifted to show that same family's young daughter, who later took her own life after years of feeling rejected by both white and black communities. "You never knew about that, did you, Pastor?" the demon whispered. "Actions have consequences that ripple far beyond our understanding." The next scene showed Rachel as a teenager, crying in her room after I'd forbidden her from attending a school dance with a white classmate. The pain in her eyes was unbearable to watch. "Stop," I pleaded. "I understand now." "Oh, you've only begun to understand," the demon replied. We continued walking until we reached a vast chamber. In the center was a pool of what looked like liquid fire, but instead of flames, it contained swirling memories, millions of moments of hatred, prejudice, and discrimination all churning together. "Look closer," the demon commanded. As I peered into the pool, I saw faces I knew, civil rights leaders I had criticized for being too radical, white allies I had rejected for not understanding our struggle, young people of both races I had discouraged from friendship or romance. Each memory burned like acid in my mind. Then I saw him, my father, William Johnson, submerged in the burning liquid, but still recognizable. His eyes met mine, filled with the same hatred he had taught me. "Son," he called out, his voice gargled with pain, "you followed my teachings well." The sight of my father suffering the consequences of his own hatred he had passed down to me broke something inside me. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face. "Your father taught you well," the demon observed. "Generational hatred is one of our favorite tools. It's so efficient." Just then I heard another voice, a young man's voice I recognized. "Pastor Johnson." I turned to see Michael Thompson, one of my former students, standing in the shadows. Michael had been a bright, promising young man who had come out as gay in his senior year. I had publicly condemned him from my pulpit, and he had taken his own life a week later. "Michael," I whispered, horror and shame flooding through me. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't change what you did," the demon interjected. "Your words have power, Pastor, the power to heal or destroy. You chose destruction again and again." The chamber began to fill with voices, every person I had ever judged, condemned, or rejected. Their accusations echoed off the walls, creating a deafening chorus of pain and betrayal. Each voice was a testament to my failure to live up to the very gospel I preached. "Please," I begged, covering my ears against the onslaught. "I was wrong. I see that now." The demon laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Seeing isn't enough. Feel their pain. Experience their rejection. Know what it is to be judged as you have judged others." Suddenly I felt every moment of pain I had ever inflicted on others. Every harsh word, every dismissive glance, every act of discrimination, I felt them all from the victim's perspective. The agony was unbearable. In that moment I understood what Jesus meant when he said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." This wasn't just about facing God's judgment, it was about truly understanding the impact of our actions on others. As I knelt there, overwhelmed by the weight of my sins, I heard a new sound cutting through the chaos, a baby's cry. Looking up, I saw a vision of Rachel in a hospital bed, holding a newborn child, my grandchild, who would carry both black and white heritage in their veins. "That future may never come to pass," the demon said softly, "unless you learn the true meaning of love." The vision faded, leaving me alone with my guilt and the growing realization that my journey through hell was far from over. The demon led me deeper into hell's depths, to what appeared to be a vast amphitheater filled with countless souls. Each level held people segregated not by race but by the nature of their hatred. "Welcome to the theater of lost souls," the demon announced, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. On the first level I saw religious leaders, priests, pastors, imams, and rabbis, all who had used their positions to spread hatred rather than love. They sat in burning pews, forced to listen to their own sermons played back to them for eternity, each hateful word now burning their tongues like hot coals. "Your seat awaits," Pastor Johnson, the demon, gestured to an empty space. "Unless, of course, you learned something from this tour." Moving down, we passed through rows of parents who had taught their children to hate. They were forced to watch endless scenes of their children perpetuating cycles of violence and discrimination, powerless to stop the legacy they had created. I saw my father among them, reaching out helplessly as scenes of my own prejudiced actions played before him. "Dad," I called out, but he couldn't hear me. He was trapped in his own personal hell, watching the hatred he had planted in my heart bear its bitter fruit. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. In a dimly lit corner, I recognized Mrs. Mercer, the store owner who had accused me of stealing when I was 14. She was reliving that moment repeatedly, but from my perspective, feeling the shame and hurt she had caused the young boy I had been. "Interesting, isn't it?" the demon mused. "How one moment of hatred can shape a lifetime of choices." We continued our descent, reaching a level that made my blood run cold. Here were the souls of those who had committed suicide because of rejection and hatred. Michael Thompson sat among them, but he wasn't alone. Next to him sat Sarah Williams, Rachel's best friend from high school who had disappeared after I banned their friendship. "Sarah," I whispered in horror. "What? How?" "She couldn't bear the rejection," Michael explained, his voice hollow. "Being told her love for Rachel was wrong, that their friendship was inappropriate because she was white. She died alone, Pastor Johnson, thinking she wasn't worthy of love." The weight of this revelation brought me to my knees. I had never known what happened to Sarah. Rachel had asked about her for months after she disappeared, but I had dismissed her questions, satisfied that I had protected my daughter from what I saw as a dangerous influence. "Would you like to hear her last thoughts?" the demon asked, almost gently. Before I could respond, Sarah's voice filled my mind. "If Pastor Johnson is right, if God really does hate friendships between blacks and whites, then I don't want to live in such a world." "No," I moaned, "I was wrong. God forgive me, I was so wrong." The demon led me to another section where I saw countless mixed-race couples, torn apart by family prejudice and societal hatred. Among them, I recognized faces from my own congregation, young people I had counseled against unequally yoked relationships, using scripture to justify my bigotry. Each of these souls represents a love story you helped destroy, the demon explained. Each represents joy you stole from the world in the name of protecting your people. As we walked, I saw more familiar faces, white families I had turned away from my church, black parishioners I had criticized for being too friendly with whites, children I had discouraged from interracial friendships. Each soul bore the weight of my influence on their lives. Then the demon showed me something that shattered my heart: Rachel's tears through the years. Every time I had made her feel ashamed of her capacity to love across racial lines, every time I had made her choose between her father's approval and her own heart, the cumulative weight of her pain was overwhelming. "Your daughter," the demon observed, "has more of God's love in her heart than you ever had in your sermons. She sees with eyes unclouded by hatred, yet you would condemn her for this gift." I watched scenes from Rachel's life at the hospital, her gentle hands caring for children of all races, her love transforming lives, her relationship with James bringing hope to families who saw in them the possibility of a world without racial barriers. And now the demon continued, "You would deny her the joy of a love that transcends your prejudices. You would condemn your own grandchildren to non-existence because of the color of their father's skin." The vision of those unborn grandchildren returned beautiful children who would embody the unity I had preached but never practiced, children who would never exist if I didn't change. "Please," I begged, "I need to make this right. I need to change." The demon's laugh was cold. "Change? Here in hell? Oh, Pastor Johnson, you don't understand. This isn't a redemption story. This is justice." But even as he spoke those words, I felt something stirring in my soul, a warmth that hell's cold darkness couldn't extinguish. It was love, pure, unconditional love, the kind I had preached about, but never fully embraced. And in that moment, I began to pray. Not the self-righteous prayers of my pastoral life, but humble prayers of genuine repentance. As I prayed in that dark place, memories flooded through me, not just of my sins, but of missed opportunities for love and redemption. I saw Rachel as a child asking me why she couldn't invite her white friend Emily to her birthday party. I saw James Anderson working tirelessly in the emergency room, saving lives without regard for race. I saw my wife Sarah's disappointed face every time I let prejudice override compassion. "Fascinating," the demon observed. "Even here in the depths of hell, you cling to hope. Let me show you something that might change that." We moved to a new chamber where a massive screen flickered to life. On it, I saw an alternate version of my life, one where I had chosen love over hate. I watched myself welcome all races into my church, saw my congregation grow into a vibrant, multicultural family. I witnessed the joy on Rachel's face as she grew up in an environment of acceptance and understanding. "This could have been your legacy," the demon taunted. "Instead, you chose this." The image shifted to show the reality: a divided church, hurt families, and Rachel's tears. But then something unexpected happened. In the midst of these visions, I saw something the demon hadn't intended: the power of change. I saw how one person's transformation could affect generations. I witnessed the ripple effect of love overcoming hatred. "You're showing me my failures," I said, standing straighter, "but you're also showing me that change is possible." The demon's eyes flashed with anger. Perhaps we need to visit the river of regret. We moved to a vast cavern where a river of what appeared to be black tar flowed sluggishly. Faces emerged from the surface, each one a person who had died with regrets about hatred and prejudice. They reached out with tar-covered hands, their mouths open in silent screams. Every soul here thought they would have time to change, the demon explained. They all believed tomorrow would be the day they would open their hearts. Tomorrow became never. As I watched, I saw something that made my heart stop, a possible future version of myself, submerged in the tar, reaching out to Rachel as she walked away with James and their children, unable to see or hear my cries of regret. "That's your future," the demon said softly. Unless what I asked, though I already knew the answer. Unless you truly change. Not just your actions, but your heart. Real change, Pastor Johnson. The kind that costs something. In that moment I remembered a verse one had preached many times but never fully understood. "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal." The demon watched me curiously. Quoting scripture in hell? Bold choice. "Not quoting," I replied. "Understanding. Finally understanding." I looked at the river of regret again, but this time I saw something different. Each face represented not just regret, but a lesson, a testimony to the importance of choosing love before it's too late. Then I heard singing, faint but clear, cutting through hell's oppressive atmosphere. It was a gospel hymn, one Sarah used to sing, "Amazing Grace." The voices seemed to be coming from somewhere above, beyond the darkness. Ah, the demon smiled wickedly. "The prayers of the righteous. Your daughter and that white doctor are praying for you right now, even after how you treated them. Ironic, isn't it?" But the demon's words had lost their sting. The singing grew stronger, and with it came a realization. Love wasn't just an emotion or a choice, it was a transformative power. The very power I had preached about but never fully embraced. "You know," I said to the demon, "you've shown me hell's version of justice, but you've forgotten something." "And what's that?" the demon asked, amusement in his voice. "Grace. The same grace that allows a heart full of hatred to be transformed by love. The grace I've preached about but never fully accepted." For the first time I saw uncertainty flicker across the demon's face. The singing grew louder, and with it came a light, not the harsh red glare of hell, but a soft, warm radiance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This isn't part of your tour," the demon growled, but I could hear fear in his voice. The light grew stronger, and I felt something I hadn't felt since entering this place: hope. Real, tangible hope. Not just for escape from hell, but for genuine transformation. "No," I agreed, "this is something else entirely. This is redemption." The light that had begun as a distant glow grew stronger, causing the demon to back away. In that luminous moment, the darkness of hell seemed to recede, and I found myself in what appeared to be a vast courtroom. The air here was different, heavy not with suffering, but with truth. "Nathaniel Johnson," a voice rang out, carrying both authority and compassion. "You stand accused of the sin of hatred disguised as righteousness." Before me appeared a massive book, its pages turning by themselves. Each page showed moments from my life, not just my actions, but the thoughts and intentions behind them. I saw myself denying membership to white families while quoting scripture about preserving our heritage. I watched as I counseled young couples to break up, all while claiming to protect them from a world that wouldn't understand. "These are not just memories," the voice explained. "These are souls you've influenced, lives you've impacted, hatred you've perpetuated." The book continued, turning its pages, showing me Rachel's life through God's eyes. I saw her struggle between loving her father and following her heart. I witnessed her private tears, her prayers for me to understand, her pain when I rejected James. But I also saw something I hadn't before: her unwavering faith that love would eventually win. "Your daughter understood what you forgot," the voice continued. "That my love knows no color." Suddenly, Jesus himself stood before me, his presence both comforting and terrifying. His eyes held all the love I had preached about but never truly understood. "You used my name to justify hatred," he said softly. "You twisted my words to support your prejudice." Scenes from my sermons played around us, moments where I had carefully selected Bible verses to support segregation, while ignoring the countless messages of unity and universal love. Each memory was a knife in my heart. Lord, I fell to my knees. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Yes, Jesus agreed, you were. But acknowledgement is only the beginning. Show me what's in your heart now. At his words, my chest seemed to open, and every thought, every feeling, every hidden prejudice was exposed to his light. I saw my hatred for what it truly was, not righteous protection of my people, but a cancer that had eaten away at my soul and poisoned those around me. Your father taught you to hate, Jesus said, but I taught you to love. Which teaching will you choose now? The question hung in the air as more scenes appeared, possible futures branching out before me. I saw two distinct paths, one where I remained unchanged, leading to Rachel walking away forever, my church dying a slow death of irrelevance, and my soul eventually joining the other hateful spirits in hell's depths. The other path showed healing, reconciliation, and a legacy of love that would impact generations. This is why you were brought here, Jesus explained. Not just to see the consequences of hatred, but to understand the power of transformation. Your journey through hell wasn't just punishment, it was awakening. In that moment, I felt the full weight of every hateful word I'd ever spoken, every discriminatory action I'd ever taken, every life I'd helped to damage or destroy. But instead of crushing me, this weight became a catalyst for change. Lord, I prayed, tears streaming down my face, transform my heart. I don't want to just act differently, I want to be different. I want to love as you love. Jesus stepped closer, his presence filling me with a warmth that drove away hell's lingering chill. That prayer, he said, is the beginning of real change. But remember, true transformation will cost you everything you thought you knew about righteousness. The scenes around us shifted to show my church, my family, my entire life. Are you willing to lose your reputation among those who share your prejudices? Are you ready to stand for love even when it means standing alone? Looking at these images, I realized the full magnitude of what real change would require. It wasn't just about accepting Rachel's relationship with James. It was about completely dismantling the belief system I had built my life upon. Yes, I whispered, then louder, yes, Lord, whatever it costs. The moment I spoke these words, something began to change within me. It felt like a wall crumbling, like chains breaking, like light flooding into places that had been dark for decades. As the transformation coursed through me, Jesus led me to what appeared to be a vast mirror. But instead of my reflection, I saw every person I had ever influenced with my prejudice. Their images rippled like water, each face telling a story of pain, rejection, or learned hatred. Your words have power, Jesus said. They can heal or destroy, unite or divide. Watch what happens when hatred is replaced with love. He touched the mirror and the images began to change. I saw my church becoming a place of true unity, with people of all races worshiping together. I witnessed healing in families I had once torn apart with my counsel. Most importantly, I saw Rachel and James surrounded by children who carried the beauty of both their heritages. This is not just a possibility, Jesus explained. This is your mission if you choose to accept it. Suddenly, the demon who had guided me through hell appeared, but he seemed smaller now, less intimidating in Christ's presence. He doesn't mean it, the demon sneered. This is just fear talking. He'll return to his old ways the moment he leaves this place. Jesus turned to me. Will you? The question hung in the air as memories of my life played before us, every moment of choosing hatred over love, fear over faith, prejudice over grace. But now I saw something else too, every missed opportunity for love, every chance at redemption I had ignored. No, I said firmly, looking directly at the demon. Love is stronger than hate. I understand that now. The demon laughed, but the sound was hollow. Fine words from a man who couldn't even accept his own daughter's happiness. You're right, I admitted. I failed her. I failed everyone. But failure isn't final, not when grace is present. As I spoke these words, a warm light began to emanate from within me, growing stronger with each truth I acknowledged. The demon stepped back, shielding his eyes. You see, Jesus said, truth spoken in love has power over darkness. Then he showed me one final vision, my own death, years in the future. I saw myself surrounded by a diverse family, Rachel and James, their children, and countless others, whose lives had been touched by the message of inclusive love. I saw my church transformed into a beacon of racial reconciliation. But most importantly, I saw hearts change because they witnessed genuine transformation in their pastor. That future is possible, Jesus said, but it will require daily choice. Every day you must choose love over hate, unity over division, grace over judgment. The demon made one last attempt. What about your father's legacy? What about protecting your people? My father was wrong, I said, feeling the truth of these words in my soul. And my people are all people. Every race, every color, we're all God's children. At these words, the demon shrieked and disappeared, dissolving into the darkness. But the darkness itself began to recede, pushed back by the growing light within and around me. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. You have seen hell's justice. Now you will experience heaven's grace. But remember, this gift of understanding comes with responsibility. I know, I replied. I have to share this truth. I have to help others break free from the chains of hatred. And it will cost you, he warned. Some will call you traitor. Others will say you've lost your way. Are you prepared for that? Looking into his eyes, I found the courage to answer truthfully. With your help, yes, love is worth any cost. The light grew blindingly bright, and I felt a pulling sensation, as if my soul was being drawn back to my body. But before I left that holy place, I heard Jesus' final words. Go and love as I have loved you, without condition, without reservation, without regard for race or status. This is your new calling. The light engulfed me completely, and I felt myself rising. I gasped awake on the hospital bed, my chest burning as if I'd been struck by lightning. Through the blur of fluorescent lights, I saw Rachel's tear-stained face and James's concerned eyes watching me. But before I could speak, before I could share my transformation, I had to face the deepest tragedy of all, one I hadn't known existed. He's stable, I heard James say professionally, but his voice cracked with emotion. Rachel, do you want me to stay? My daughter's reply chilled me to my bone. No, I need to tell him something. Alone. As James left the room, Rachel sat beside my bed, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. The look in her eyes spoke of a pain far deeper than our recent conflict. Daddy, she began, her voice barely a whisper, there's something you need to know. Something I never told you, about the night Mom died. My heart stuttered. I had always believed Sarah died peacefully, accepting God's will. The way Rachel spoke suggested otherwise. Mom didn't just die from cancer, Rachel continued, tears streaming down her face. She gave up fighting. The night before she passed, she overheard you telling Deacon Williams that you'd rather see me dead than marry a white man. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I remembered that conversation, my angry words spoken in what I thought was private. I had forgotten about it until now. Mom knew then that her dying wish for you to let go of your hatred would go unfulfilled. She lost hope, Daddy. The doctor said she could have had months left, but she just stopped fighting. The monitor beside my bed began beeping faster as the full weight of this revelation crashed over me. Sarah, my beloved Sarah, had died with a broken heart, not just from cancer, but from the knowledge that her husband's hatred was stronger than his love. There's more, Rachel said, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. 2 years ago, I tried to follow her. My world stopped. What? After you threw James out of the church that Sunday, after you quoted scripture about being unequally yoked and called our love an abomination, I went home and took all my sleeping pills. I couldn't breathe. The thought of my Rachel, my baby girl, attempting to end her life because of my hatred. James found me, she continued. He's the one who saved me. The same man you condemned saved your daughter's life. And you know what he did after that? He convinced me not to tell you, saying it would only hurt you. He protected your heart even while you were breaking mine. Each word was a dagger, piercing deeper than any pain I'd felt in hell. My prejudice hadn't just hurt strangers, it had nearly killed my own child. Why, I struggled to speak through my tears. Why are you telling me this now? Rachel placed her hand on her stomach, and I understood. Because I'm pregnant, Daddy. With twins, and I need to know if my children will have a grandfather who loves them fully, completely, regardless of their mixed race, or if She took a deep breath. Or if they'll be safer never knowing you at all. The tragedy wasn't just in the past, it was standing at a crossroads waiting for my response. Everything I had learned in hell, every truth Jesus had shown me, crystallized in this moment. Either I would choose love and break the cycle of hatred, or I would lose my daughter and her children forever. Through my tears, I reached for Rachel's hand, holding it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Rachel. I began, my voice hoarse with emotion. I've been to hell. Not metaphorically, I really went there. And do you know what I learned? Hell is where love goes to die, where hatred triumphs, and where regret burns eternal. I told her about my journey, about seeing Michael Thompson, about Sarah Williams, about every soul I had hurt with my prejudice. But most importantly, I told her about the transformation I had experienced. But Daddy, Rachel interrupted, her voice tinged with skepticism. How do I know this isn't just fear talking? How can I trust that you won't revert to your old ways once you're better? As if in answer to her question, James walked back into the room. Instead of the tension I used to feel at his presence, I felt only gratitude. James, I called out, please come here. He approached cautiously, standing protectively near Rachel. I could see in his stance years of learned awareness, of preparing to shield my daughter from my hatred. The tragedy of that reality wasn't lost on me. I owe you an apology, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. No, I owe you far more than that. You saved my daughter twice, once from death and once from becoming like me. You loved her when I chose hate over love. You protected her from my prejudice while I claimed to be protecting her from the world. Tears streamed down my face as I continued. I saw what hatred does to souls, James. I saw where it leads. And I saw what love, true, unconditional love like yours can do. You're not just the man my daughter loves, you're the man who showed me what real Christian love looks like. Rachel was sobbing now, and even James's professional demeanor cracked, revealing the emotion beneath. But I wasn't finished. There was one more tragedy to address. Rachel, your mother, I paused, gathering strength. Sarah was right about everything. And I dishonored her memory with every act of hatred, every moment of prejudice. But what breaks my heart most is knowing that she died believing I would never change. I placed my hand on Rachel's stomach, feeling the miracle of new life beneath. These babies, they're not just your children, they're a new beginning. A chance to break the cycle of hatred that killed their grandmother, that almost killed their mother, that has destroyed so many lives. Looking at both of them, I made a vow, if you'll let me, I want to be part of their lives. Not as the man I was, but as the man your mother always knew I could be, Rachel. As the man who finally understands that love, real love, knows no color. The room fell silent except for our shared tears. The tragedy of all the time wasted, all the pain caused, all the love rejected hung heavy in the air. But within that tragedy, something new was being born, hope. I can't change the past, I admitted. I can't bring back those we've lost to. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through my hospital window, more revelations came that shook my world to its foundation. Elizabeth Anderson, James's mother, came to visit, carrying a manila envelope that would change everything I thought I knew about my past. Nathaniel, she said, settling into the chair beside my bed, there's something you need to know about your father. She pulled out an old photograph, yellowed with age. This was taken in 1963, during the Birmingham protests. The photo showed a group of civil rights activists, both black and white, standing together. Among them, unmistakably, was my father, William Johnson, standing next to a young white woman. That woman, Elizabeth said softly, was my mother. Your father and she were in love, Nathaniel. But the world wasn't ready. The threats, the violence, it broke him. That's when he changed, when he started teaching you to hate. My hands trembled as I held the photograph. But he always told me. He told you what his broken heart needed you to believe, Elizabeth interrupted gently. Your father's hatred wasn't born from ignorance, it was born from pain. The same pain you've carried, the same pain you've passed on. The truth hit me like a physical blow. My father's fierce racism, his constant warnings about trusting white people, his angry reactions to any mention of integration, it had all been a shield, a protection against his own heartbreak. There's more, Elizabeth continued, pulling out more documents. Your father wrote letters to my mother for years, even after he married your mother. Letters about his regret, about his shame for teaching you to hate. The last one." She paused, pulling out a final envelope. "Was written to you." The letter was dated just days before my father's death. With shaking hands, I opened it. "My son, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've lived with the shame of what I taught you, watching you carry forward the hatred that destroyed the best part of me. My love for Katherine Anderson was real, but my courage wasn't strong enough. When I lost her, I let bitterness take root, and worse, I planted that bitterness in you. I see you now, a pastor preaching love while harboring the hatred I gave you, and I know this is my fault. My greatest sin wasn't losing Katherine, it was teaching you that love had color, that hearts should stay segregated like the water fountains of my youth. I pray you'll find this truth someday. I pray you'll be stronger than I was. Love doesn't divide, son. Hatred does that. Love multiplies, grows, breaks down walls. Forgive me for my weakness. Forgive me for poisoning your heart with my pain. Your father." William. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. All this time I whispered all this hatred was just his pain passed down. Elizabeth took my hand. "And now your daughter stands where my mother stood, loving across the lines that broke your father's heart. The question is, Nathaniel, will you be stronger than he was?" Looking at the photograph again, I saw my father's young face full of love and hope before fear and pain twisted it into hatred. I thought of Rachel and James, of their unborn children, of the choice before me. "The cycle ends here," I said firmly. "These grandchildren will never know the burden of inherited hatred." Elizabeth smiled, tears in her eyes. "Then your father's final prayer has been answered. Through you, his greatest mistake will finally be corrected." The truth of my father's story had completely reversed everything I had believed about my heritage of hatred. It wasn't protection, it was pain. It wasn't preservation, it was fear. And now I had the chance to write a different ending to our family story. With the truth about my father revealed, other revelations began cascading through my life like dominoes falling. James came to my room later that day carrying medical records that added another layer to our shared story. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his professional demeanor softened by compassion. "The night you collapsed at church, it wasn't just a heart attack. You had a rare condition that should have killed you instantly. By all medical standards, you were dead for almost 7 minutes. He spread the charts across my bed. "During those 7 minutes, something happened in your brain that we can't explain. Your neural activity, it was unlike anything I've ever seen. It was as if your mind was more active in death than in life." I looked at the readings, seeing scientific confirmation of my spiritual journey. 7 minutes, I mused. It felt like an eternity. "There's more," James continued. "The man who taught me everything I know about cardiac care, the doctor who inspired me to become a surgeon, was Michael Thompson's father." The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Michael. "The student who?" Yes, James nodded. "After Michael died, his father dedicated his life to saving others. He specifically mentored young doctors from all backgrounds, trying to create the kind of world his son never got to see. I was his last student before he passed away." The interconnectedness of our stories left me speechless. Here was James, trained by the father of a young man I had helped push toward suicide, now saving my life and loving my daughter. "Dr. Thompson never knew about your role in Michael's death," James said quietly. "But he always told me that hatred is a heart condition no surgery can fix. Only love can do that." I thought about the cosmic irony, how the ripples of both hatred and love had brought us to this moment. "You could have let me die," I whispered. "After everything I did, everything I said about you and Rachel." James shook his head. "That's not who I am. That's not who Rachel and I are teaching our children to be." "Children," I repeated the word, its meaning hitting me anew. "Twins," Rachel said. "Yes," James smiled. "A boy and a girl. And according to the ultrasound, he pulled out one final image. They're holding hands in the womb." The ultrasound image showed 2 tiny forms, their hands indeed intertwined. In that grainy black and white picture, I saw the future, a future where love had already conquered hatred before birth. "We were thinking," James added hesitantly, "of naming the boy Michael." Tears flowed freely now. "And the girl?" "Sarah," he said softly, "if if that's okay with you." In that moment, the final walls around my heart crumbled completely. The children would carry the names of two people whose lives had been touched by hatred, one lost to its violence, one to its sorrow. But in their new life, these names would represent not tragedy but hope, not division but unity. "It's more than okay," I managed to say. "It's perfect." As James left the room, I looked out my window at the setting sun. The world hadn't changed. Prejudice and hatred still existed out there. But something had changed inside me, fundamentally and irreversibly. I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at love. And I intended to make it count. 6 months later, I stood in my church pulpit again, but this time was different. The congregation before me was transformed. Faces of all colors filled the pews, united in worship. Rachel sat in the front row, her pregnancy now visible, with James beside her. Elizabeth Anderson sat with them, her hand clasped with Rachel's. "Brothers and sisters," I began, my voice strong with conviction, "today I want to share a story about death, redemption, and the power of love to overcome the deepest hatred." For the first time, I publicly shared my journey through hell, my encounter with Jesus, and the truths I had learned about love and hatred. I spoke about my father's hidden love story, about Michael Thompson, about every soul I had hurt with my prejudice. "But this isn't just my story," I continued, gesturing to the congregation. "This is our story. Every person in this room has been touched by hatred, has carried its burden, has felt its sting. And every person here has the power to choose love instead." I looked at Rachel and James, their hands intertwined. My daughter and her husband taught me that love doesn't see color. Their children, my grandchildren, will be born into a world that still struggles with hatred, but they will know from their very first breath that love is stronger. Moving from behind the pulpit, I walked down to stand among my congregation. The hell I experienced wasn't just a place of torment, it was a mirror showing me what hatred does to the human soul. But heaven's grace showed me something more powerful, what love can do to heal it. Reaching out, I took James's hand in my right and Rachel's in my left. Today, we're not just a church, we're a family. Not black, not white, not divided by race or history or prejudice. Just children of God, united in love. The congregation stood and something remarkable happened. Without prompting, people began reaching across pews, across racial lines, taking each other's hands. The sight brought tears to my eyes. This was the vision Jesus had shown me in hell, now made real. "Let this be our testimony," I declared, my voice thick with emotion. "That love is stronger than hate. That grace is more powerful than prejudice. That redemption is possible for anyone who chooses to embrace it." As we stood there, united in a chain of joined hands, someone began to sing "Amazing Grace." The hymn spread through the church, voices of all timbres blending in perfect harmony. Looking at Rachel's radiant face, at James's proud smile, at the visible sign of new life growing within my daughter, I knew that this was just the beginning. The journey from hatred to love wasn't over, it never really would be. But we were on the right path. The twins within Rachel's womb would be born into a different world than the one I had known. They would have a grandfather who understood that love transcends all boundaries, a church family that embraced all of God's children, and parents whose love story testified to the power of choosing love over hate. This was our legacy now, not the inherited hatred of the past, but the chosen love of the future. 3 months later, I stood in the hospital room, holding my newborn grandchildren. Michael with his cafe au lait skin and his grandmother Sarah's eyes, and little Sarah, whose complexion was a perfect blend of her parents, with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of heaven. "Look at 'em," Daddy, Rachel whispered from her bed, exhausted but glowing. "They're perfect." James stood beside her, his doctor's composure completely gone, tears of joy streaming down his face. "They were holding hands when they were born," he said, "just like in the ultrasound." Elizabeth Anderson, now simply Grandma Beth, was taking pictures, capturing every precious moment. The room was filled with love so tangible it felt like a physical presence. Looking down at these miraculous babies, I thought about my journey, about the hell I had visited and the heaven I now held in my arms, about my father's hidden love story and the courage it took to break cycles of hatred, about Michael Thompson and Sarah Williams, whose names these children now carried, transforming tragedy into hope. "I have something for them," I said, pulling out 2 small Bibles. Inside each one, I've written a message, not about doctrine or division, but about love, about their heritage, all of it, about their grandmother Sarah's wisdom, about their great-grandfather William's love story, about their parents' courage. Rachel took the Bibles, opening them with trembling hands. Inside each I had written, "Dear Michael, Sarah, you were born from love that was stronger than hatred, courage that overcame fear, and truth that defeated lies. Your very existence is proof that God's love knows no boundaries. Never let anyone tell you that love has a color. Never believe that hearts must stay divided. You are the answer to generations of prayers, the healing of ancient wounds, the hope for a better world. With eternal love, Grandpa Nathaniel." The monitors beeped steadily as we sat together, a family united by love rather than divided by race. Outside the window, the sun was setting on Memphis, the same city where I had once learned to hate, now becoming a place where I was learning to love more perfectly each day. "You know," James said thoughtfully, "these babies are going to grow up hearing quite a story." Yes, I agreed, they will. They'll hear about hatred and hell, about love and redemption. But most importantly, they'll know they were born from a love that was strong enough to change hearts and heal generations of pain. Rachel reached for my hand. They'll know their grandfather's story too, how it's never too late to choose love over hate. As I held these precious lives, I thought about my vision in hell, about Jesus' words about transformation coming at a cost. The cost had been worth it, worth every uncomfortable conversation, every lost friendship with those who couldn't accept change, every moment of confronting my own prejudices. Looking at my grandchildren, I whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances, for redemptive love, for the miracle of transformation. These babies would grow up in a world that still struggled with racism, but they would carry within them the living proof that love could triumph over hatred. This was our family's new legacy, not one of division and prejudice, but of unity and love. A legacy that started in the depths of hell but found its fulfillment in the miracle of new life and redeemed love. And that was just the beginning. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this powerful story of transformation, love, and redemption. If you've been moved by Nathaniel's journey from hatred to understanding, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What touched you most about his experience? Have you witnessed similar transformations in your own life? Please support our team by subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button if this story resonated with you. Share this video with friends and family who might need to hear this message of hope and healing. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content that can change hearts and minds. Together we can spread the message that love is stronger than hate, and it's never too late for transformation. Join our community of storytellers and believers in the power of love to overcome all barriers.